Hello and welcome to another video. It's been quite a while since my last one, so I might be a bit rusty here. I have still been getting quite a few subs to the channel and also lots of comments since I have been away, so I will thank you all for that and I will reply to all the comments left for me. I hope you are all well and staying safe. This video is going to be about the twins and their marriages while in prison. The twins have had partners throughout their lives, with Ron mainly keeping the company of men. It was said he had a deep love for a girl called Monica, but apart from a few lines in John Pearson's books on the twins, there does not seem to be too much information about Monica. Ron's main steady boyfriend during the 1960s as a free man was a man named Bobby Buckley. Bobby Buckley worked in the twins club Esmeralda's Barn during the early 1960s, and he maintained a relationship with Ron throughout the 1960s. It is said by John Pearson that Monica and Bobby Buckley started a relationship after Ron was sent to prison in 1969, and it is said that they both died of a drugs overdose in the 1970s. Apart from Monica, Ronnie seems to have steered clear of the company of women bar his mother and his aunties, and that was until the first of his marriages in Broadmoor in the mid-1980s. Reg, on the other hand, during his years as a free man, had a few relationships with women, and we know about the first, of course, that was Frances Shay, who he eventually married in 1965. And he was married to Frances until her death in June 1967. He then seems to have dated a woman named Christine Boyce, but this relationship with Christine Boyce seems to have been very short, because by the time of Reggie's arrest in May 1968, he was in a relationship with a girl called Carol Thompson. Carol Thompson seems to have drifted off the scene not long after Reg went to prison, with Reg claiming that she was cheating on him while he was on remand in Brixton prison. She was bringing in clean clothes for Reggie at the time, and he said he found a pair of men's underwear in his washing that was not his. He came to the conclusion that she was being unfaithful, and that was really the end of that. As far as I can tell, there were no other women romantically involved with Reggie during his early years in prison. I'm sure Reg got lots of offers via letters and maybe a few females visited, but I can't seem to see any actual relationships forming during these years of his life. Friend of the family, Maureen Flanagan, said that Reggie did propose marriage to her during his time in prison, but she refused this offer. This may have been after his mother Violet died in 1982. Declining Reggie's offer of marriage, Maureen said that she would rather be a friend, a sister, rather than Mrs. Reggie Kray. I think rather than Reggie having feelings for Maureen, I think it would have just been a marriage for convenience and also to comfort Reg in his grief for his mother. Maybe Reggie was feeling very alone at that point, as Ron was now settling into a more comfortable life in Broadmoor in Crowthorne in Berkshire. Like Ron, Reg was attracted to men, so this is probably the point at which he gave in to his homosexual tendencies and started relationships with fellow inmates. It was around the early 1980s that the authorities started noting about Reggie's possible homosexual activities, so it does all seem to tie in around this time. Ronnie Kray got married for the first time in 1985 to a woman called Elaine Mildener. Elaine was a secretary in the East End, and she was a well-dressed, homely, motherly lady who was divorced with 2 children. It has been said that Elaine had been writing to Reggie at first after reading a book about the twins, and then she travelled to Parkhurst to visit Reg. On the visit, Reg then suggested that she visit Ron, and this is what she did. It mirrors the circumstances that led to Ron's second marriage to Kate Howard in 1989, and we will go into that a little bit later. The day Ron proposed marriage to Elaine, Maureen Flanagan was also there on that visit, as Ronnie wanted Maureen to meet Elaine. From that visit that day, Maureen Flanagan said Elaine Mildner was quite a meek woman, and she knew that she wasn't really cut out for being with Ron and all the aggro that came with it. Just like Reg's proposal of marriage to Maureen Flanagan, Ron's marriage to Elaine Mildner was also for convenience rather than being born out of any love. Ron at this time was in a steady relationship in Broadmoor with a man called Charlie Smith. How much Elaine knew of this, who knows? As with most things Kray, since their appearance at their mother's funeral in 1982, the media would welcome any story offered by the Kray twins, and one of Ronnie Kray getting married was no exception. The media interest in the twins by this time was gaining pace since Violet Kray's funeral. Bar a few articles, the twins seem to have lain dormant throughout the 70s after their very high profile trial in 1969. The media interest in the twins would become even greater after the release of the 1990 film The Krays, where it seemed the Krays were almost a weekly feature in most of the tabloids. So, as well as convenience, Ronnie Kray also had money on his mind with the marriage to Elaine Mildner in 1985. Maureen Flanagan, who had several contacts in the newspaper world due to her modelling career, was going to act as a go-between and get the ball rolling. Ronnie was adamant that he wanted £20,000 for the story, but in the end he had to settle for £10,000. £10,000 is a lot of money in any time frame, but in 1985 it was a very substantial amount of money indeed. There was also the suggestion that Ronnie was getting married to try and aid a release from Broadmoor. By marrying, Ron would add something of a normality to his life that might sway the authorities in allowing him to be freed. Kray associate Chris Lambriano said of this,
his mind was alert enough to know, like, if I can convince the authorities that I'm sane and I'm no longer a danger, I'm not a homosexual, I'm in a proper man and woman relationship, that I'm sane, I'll get out of this and then I've got a chance of getting out.
Ronnie married in 1985, and a photographer called Arthur Steele took photos of that day in Broadmoor Hospital. Arthur Steele said of the day, "I had met the Krays on a few occasions, both on business and socially. Whenever I was invited to one of their functions, I found it very difficult to turn down, as you didn't want to upset either of them." Ronnie's marriage was a big story for the newspaper, and I was chosen to take the official pictures. In order to secure exclusive photographs, we had to pay Ronnie a lump sum of money. Another photographer was sent along to accompany me, but not to take pictures. He was there to ensure everything went smoothly and to help carry my camera, bags and the cash. Whenever I look at this picture, the awkwardness of the situation still strikes me. Here are these notorious gangsters with prison officers and the prison's governor all confined together in a small makeshift registry office. Ronnie's brother Charlie is there, along with Joe Pyle and Alex Steen. I'm sure that these three men didn't want to be in or anywhere near a high security psychiatric hospital. And then you have the innocent smile on Elaine's face, which is a complete contrast to the haunting stare of Ronnie's. It's a fascinating insight into the underworld and why somebody with such strong homosexual tendencies was getting married to a woman is beyond me. Then again, he had been certified insane. Ron and Elaine's marriage had only lasted a few years. Elaine had worn herself out with all the running around for Ron. She was constantly broke, bringing up 2 kids and having to travel to Broadmoor regular. The excitement of the wedding was a distant memory, and the money Ron was paid was probably long gone. It is said by Maureen Flanagan that on one visit, Ron suggested that they get divorced if the travelling to see him was getting too much for her. Elaine agreed with this. It's said that Ron wanted a divorce quite quickly, but could not get hold of Elaine after that, and he had sent his friend Wilf Pine and others out looking for her, to no avail. Wilf Pine says that he eventually ended up going to court in Portsmouth for Ron to get his divorce, and that was granted by the judge in 1989. For Ron, the marriage to Elaine Mildner was just convenience, and I think he maybe saw a motherly figure in her. Having lost his mother Violet a few years previously, this type of thing would have been a comfort for Ron. But the running about she had to do for Ron and the travelling to Broadmoor just got too much for Elaine, and that was the end of that.
He's a real gentleman, one of the old school. There's not many of them about.
But what sort of marriage will it be, as far as you're concerned? I mean, how often will you see him?
Well, I see him twice a week. I'm in contact with him every night, because I ring him every night. That's all really, just twice a week.
Kate Howard, a bubbly blonde kissogram from Kent, was the next one up for marriage to Ron Kray. Kate says she was at a train station on her way to somewhere, and she popped in a shop to get a book for her journey, and a book on the twins caught her eye. After reading it, she decided to write to Reggie Kray, which ended up with a visit to Reggie in Gartrey prison. Reggie didn't seem that keen on Kate by all accounts, and thought her bubbly attitude was more suited to Ron, and he suggested that she visited Ron, which she did. As you can see, it mirrors how Ron met Elaine Mildner, with Elaine writing to and then visiting Reggie first. Ron and Kate got on very well on her first visit to see Ron. They shared the same sense of humour, and her bubbly personality appealed to Ron a lot. Ron decided that on Kate's second visit he would propose marriage to her, and this is what he did. Kate laughed her head off at the idea of this, but she did accept his proposal that day. I think for this marriage Ron had money on his mind. There was a lot of things that Ron could buy in Broadmoor because of his relative freedom he had there. Ron was more of a patient rather than a prisoner in Broadmoor. It was a hospital environment and not a prison. The relative comfort Ron was in stark contrast to the more harsh environment that Reggie existed in prison. Money was more easily to spend on material things for Ron, and he needed an endless supply of money. It is said he often brought expensive watches for people in Broadmoor. Ronnie married Kate soon after his divorce in 1989. Photographs were taken that day of Kate and Ron looks a lot more happier in these photographs than he did in the Elaine Mildner ones. There was a lavish reception at Bracknell Hilton in which 100 guests attended. Obviously not Ronnie. The reception was a gift from the twins' close friend Jeff Allen. Jeff had been a close friend of the twins and Charlie Kray for many years. Charlie Kray was driven from Broadmoor in a hired Rolls Royce with the bride to the reception in Bracknell. Ron had a chunk of wedding cake to eat in his room. I'm not sure what type of money Ronnie got for his wedding story and photographs, but you can be assured that he would have made some money out of it. By this time, Kray stories were going wild in the newspapers, and this escalated even more with the release of the film The Krays in 1990, which starred Martin and Gary Kemp as the twins. In 1993, Kate Howard, now Kate Kray of course, wrote a book called Murder, Marriage and Madness, which was about her marriage to Ronnie Kray. The book angered Ronnie. There were things said in the book that Ron wanted to keep private. One of the big things that angered Ronnie was the details of Kate having relationships with other men. Her having boyfriends was something agreed between her and Ron in private. After all, Ron mainly liked men sexually, not women, and he had a steady boyfriend in Broadmoor called Charlie Smith. But for Kate to put the details of the relationship with other men in her book was a slap in the face for Ron. Maureen Flanagan says that Ron said to her on a visit, "She's making a fool of me. She didn't have the right. I told her she could have boyfriends, but she didn't have to put it in print. Now everyone knows. I ain't having it." Ronnie got divorced from Kate in the autumn of 1993. It would be the last time Ron would marry, and he would die about a year and a half after his divorce to Kate. The years of heavy medication and smoking caught up with Ron, and he died of a heart attack in March 1995, aged 61. Kate Howard kept her Kray name, which she still has to this day, and she has written a number of books, and she has had her own documentary series. Reggie seems to have resisted the attentions of women for most of his days of incarceration. As a free man, he was married of course to Frances Shay until her death in 1967, and then in the 11 months after Frances's death, he had 2 short relationships, one with Christine Boyce and one with Carol Thompson. Why Reg resisted any relationships with women during his early prison years, who knows? Reg was bisexual like his twin Ron, and he had relationships with other inmates during his incarceration. Elaine Mildener and Kate Howard are most notable for coming into the orbit of Reg in his prison years, but there is no doubt that Reg would have got more letters from other willing females and probably some visits. There was a proposal of marriage to Kray family friend Maureen Flanagan by Reggie in the 1980s, but this offer was refused by Maureen. Reg did finally find somebody in the mid-1990s by the name of Roberta Jones. Roberta was involved with the production company that attended and filmed his twin brother Ronnie's funeral in 1995. The funeral of Ron was a big occasion with a huge media interest. Some say it was the biggest funeral since Winston Churchill's in the 1960s. By 1995, the Kray name was more known than ever, and the name generated quite a bit of money. T-shirts, mugs, posters. The Kray image was a big seller. So Reg took the chance to make a few quid by the filming of his brother's funeral, and that was released on VHS in 1996 and was called The Epilogue of Ron Kray. Roberta Jones visited Reg in prison with Maureen Flanagan to discuss the production of The Epilogue of Ron Kray. This visit seems to have left a lasting impression on Reg and Roberta, and more visits followed. Eventually, Reg proposed to Roberta and she accepted. Reggie married 38-year-old Roberta in 1997 in Maidstone Prison. The night before the wedding, there was a 30-minute laser show that lit up the prison walls, and that was all arranged by Reggie. The relationship between Roberta and Reg seems different to Ronnie's, with Kate Howard and Elaine Mildener. I do think there was genuine love between Reg and Roberta. Maybe in some way she reminded him of Frances. I don't know. But it still does not make it any less bizarre than Ron's. Seeing as Reggie at this time was in relationships with fellow inmates. So in that sense, like Ronnie's marriages, it is still quite bizarre. There is, however, the reality of Reggie being released, whereas Ronnie, he was never realistically going to be released. Even if he'd lived longer, he probably wasn't going to get released. So although I do feel that Reg genuinely loved Roberta, I think he also had one eye on being released with this marriage. kind of wanting some normality in his life, like Ron wanted when he married Elaine Mildener to aid in any parole hearings. There isn't really too much to say about Reggie's marriage to Roberta. It was quite uneventful. She stood by Reg until he died in October 2000, campaigning for his release from prison, which was eventually granted on compassionate grounds shortly before he died in 2000. According to a few sources, Reggie died with his boyfriend on one side of the bed and Roberta on the other side, which is a little bit bizarre. Roberta seems to have accepted that Reggie can love her and also love another man. I accept that Reggie did love Roberta, as I have said, but in what way and how deep, who knows. Roberta has gone on to write many books, but apart from one book about Reg, she has only wrote storybooks, so that's quite refreshing, unlike Kate Kray, that name drops the twins at any opportunity as she tries to cash in on it. So that's about it for this video. It's not very long, it's only brief. It's a little look at the marriages of the twins behind bars. I don't think there is much else I can say on it, to be honest. I can't really offer you any new information, but I do hope you have enjoyed it anyway. I'm not sure when the next video will be. It has been a long time since my last one. There is still some things to talk about with the twins, so I will hopefully get around to making those videos. I kind of want to keep the channel mainly Kray. I really don't have much knowledge on anything else really, so I might not stray too far away from the subject of the twins. So that's about it. I hope you are all staying safe wherever you are, and I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I will see you again in the next one. Thank you.
I just wish I'd have met Rob about 20 years earlier, eh? I don't think I'd have had any problems then, eh? I think everything would have worked out okay.